Welcome back, fabulous fifth graders. Mrs. Cardwell here, and today we're going to be looking at lessons 7, 8, and 9 in our Unit 1, Week 1 session. Okay, so you're going to need a few things here. You're going to need your U.S. Constitution book, Then and Now, your ELA binder, your ELA notebook. You'll need a highlighter, and you'll need a pencil as well. Now remember, I'll be using Sharpie just so that you guys can see what it is I'm writing, that it projects onto the video, but you will be using a pencil so that you can erase. All right, so today we're going to start out with a new article, and this article is on page 6, 7, starts on page 6. All right, now up top, I've written our objective. Now, a learning objective is the thing that you hope to learn by the time the lesson is finished. So I like to put it right up here. Today, we're going to identify the main idea and key details of this particular article. All right, so now I'm going to model to you what I might do when I first see and start looking at a new piece of writing or a new article. Okay, so the first thing I check out, the thing that stands out to me, is that I see the title, Voting Rights Act Address. I also notice in smaller print up top, President Lyndon Johnson. It makes me think to myself, President Lyndon Johnson, address. I know that sometimes an address is a sort of a speech. So I predict that this is a speech given by President Lyndon Johnson. I wonder what this speech is about. The title includes Voting Rights Act Address. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue looking at this, ladies and gents. And this article continues on. So I notice over here, I actually have a little, it's hard for you to see it, but it's on your page. I notice we have some pictures here. Civil rights protesters, okay, people who are protesting for voting rights in Selma, Alabama on March 7th, 1965, end up in some altercations with the police. Their actions brought the issue into national focus. All right, we have this word altercation, which I may not know about, but it looks like they're in a fight and sort of conflict. Okay, so as I kind of continue on skimming through, I notice there is a graphic down here. Says the 15th Amendment was signed into law on March 30th, 1870, giving all adult Black men the right to vote. This commemorative print shows a celebratory parade that took place in Baltimore on May 19th of that year. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to look. All right, and I see some African Americans. They're standing in line. The caption tells me the number of African Americans registered to vote nearly doubled from 1965 to 1967. I wonder what it was that started that. All right. And here we have a picture with President Lyndon Johnson. Okay, our caption tells us that new voting rights legislation was introduced to Congress. The president signed the Voting Rights Act into law August 6, 1965. In this photo, he is shaking hands with Martin Luther King Jr. So we have Martin Luther King Jr. here, President Lyndon Johnson, and it looks like supporters from all sides. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the beginning. Now, I kind of give myself a little bit of a feeling of what this is going to be all about. All right, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read the introduction and paragraphs numbers 1 through 5 to learn the impact of the Voting Rights Act at that time. And I want to identify key details and determine the main idea. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write my little task. I want to underline key details as I read. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and model how we will be doing that. All right, let's go ahead and check it out. Here's our introduction here. And I can tell that it's an introduction because the print has been italicized, or it looks a little bit more fancy or curly than the print over here. So I'm going to go ahead and read through. Nearly 100 years after the 50th Amendment to the Constitution, I'm sorry, 15th, boys and girls, I was misread that. 15th Amendment to the Constitution gave African Americans the right to vote. They still face discriminatory practices that kept them from exercising this constitutional right. At the height of the civil rights movement in the mid-1960s, President Lyndon Johnson gave a voting rights speech to Congress on March 15, 1965, calling to end the oppression and disenfranchisement of Black voters. Here are some excerpts from the speech. All right, so this introduction lets me know why it was that President Lyndon Johnson gave this speech and when and where he gave it. I think these are important details, so I will underline the details that tell me that President Lyndon Johnson gave a speech in Congress in 1965 calling for an end to the disenfranchisement of Black voters. Disenfranchisement is a big word that means taking away someone's right to vote. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So I'm going to underline Johnson gave a voting rights speech on May 15th, 1965, okay, to end the oppression and disenfranchisement of Black voters. All right. Okay. Let's see, any more details that I want to go ahead and underline? Nearly 100 years after the 15th Amendment to the Constitution gave African Americans the right to vote, they still faced discriminatory practices that frequently kept them from exercising this constitutional right, and that's the right to vote. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our next page. Now remember, I'm still looking for details, and these details tell us about the impact or why it was a big thing, why it was very important to have this Voting Rights Act at this time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Paragraph 1. I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. I urge every member of both parties, Americans of all religion, all colors, from every section of this country, to join me in that cause. Now I'm going to pause for just a moment to kind of think a little bit about what it is that he's saying, and I want to go ahead and see if there are any details I need to underline. So, in this section, President Johnson begins his speech by saying that all citizens deserve the freedoms granted by the Constitution. See, Americans of all religions and of all colors to join me in this cause. The details in paragraphs 1 and 2 are interesting, but I don't think that they are essential, so I'm not going to underline them. Let's go ahead and move on to paragraphs 3 and 4. At times, history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in a man's unending search for freedom. So it was at Lexington and Concord. So it was a century ago at Appomattox. So it was last week in Selma, Alabama. There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem. And we are met here tonight as Americans, not as Democrats or Republicans. We are met here as Americans to solve that problem. The first thing I think about when I'm reading this is how maybe applicable it could be today. It's very interesting. Okay, so now going back to looking at paragraphs 3 and 4, President Johnson explains that the protest march in Selma, Alabama, so here we have Selma, Alabama right here, is a problem for the entire country, not just one group of people. And it is the responsibility of the entire country to solve this problem. Since the speech is about calling for an end to discrimination against African American voters, I think these details are important. I will underline that last sentence in paragraph 3. There is only an American problem. I will also underline these words in paragraph 4. And we are met here tonight as Americans to solve that problem. We are met here tonight as Americans to solve that problem. All right. So, going ahead and taking care of this section. Actually, let's go ahead and read through paragraph 5. This was the first nation in the history of the world to be founded with a purpose. The great phrases of that purpose still sound in every American heart, North and South. All men are created equal. Government by the consent of the governed. Give me liberty or give me death. All right, guys. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is you will be doing the same thing with sections 6 through 11. Okay? So your task read paragraphs 6 through 11 and underline key details that explain why this act was so important. Now, when we talk about act, we talk about the Voting Rights Act. Okay, so here's your task. You're reading paragraphs 6 through 11 and identify and underlined key details that explain why this act was so important. So I'm going to give you guys some time to do that. And I'll go ahead and pause for you. In fact, ladies and gents, why don't you go ahead and if you pause, if you need to take some time, just go ahead and pause your video. And then once you pause the video, you can take as much time as you need. All right, guys. So your task was to read paragraphs 6 through 11 and underline key details that explain why this act was so important. So I went ahead and read through and did that for us. Check and see if some of your underlines are the same as my underlines, okay? So in this paragraph, I decided to go pencil, guys, because I needed to erase, and I don't know if you guys can see, but we have some bleed through from the other side. So I'm going to do mine in pencil as well. Just try to zoom in so you can see it really well. All right, so I underlined, he shall share in freedom. He shall choose his leaders, educate his children, provide for his family according to his ability and merits as a human being. Now, they're talking about all people should be able to, right? Educate their children, share in the freedom, choosing the leaders, which of course means getting the right to vote. In paragraph 7, I underlined, every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. Okay? And the big one in 8, paragraph 8 is, in many places in this country, men and women are kept from voting simply because they are Negroes, which is another word for the African American community. We don't really use that anymore because it's sometimes used as maybe an impolite term, right? So we don't necessarily want to use that. But that was part of his speech, and that was the word he used. All right. So paragraph 9, I underlined. The existing process of law cannot overcome systemic and ingenious discrimination. What they're talking about there, guys, is it's this idea that the racism was so prevalent that people didn't really even think about it, right? And it was difficult to get rid of this discrimination, this racism, when there were people who really wanted to keep that discrimination in place. All right. In paragraph 10, I underlined the Constitution says that no person shall be kept from voting because of his race or color, and that we need to support and defend that part of the Constitution. All right. So what I'm going to do now that I have all of my details underlined, I'm going to go back and I'm going to move to, let's go ahead and turn to page 8. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull out my notebook. I'm going to keep my book right beside it. Okay, putting those two right next to each other. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and take some notes, ladies and gents. You remember before that my learning objective was to find the main idea and the key details. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to make a quick little chart. And instead of a T chart, it's going to be a 3 chart. But of course, first I'm going to put my date up here. Today is 9/15/2020. Okay. And this is ELA. I'm going to put W1. So it's week 1 of instruction. It's lessons 7, 8, and 9. Okay. So for this one, guys, we're going to do a chart. And instead of a T chart, we're going to do a 3 chart. So I'll do one long line across, and I'll kind of break it up just as my eye can kind of see it into 3 columns. These last 2 columns should be a little bit bigger than this one right here, because this one is just what paragraph I found that information in. You guys remember that we need to cite and share our evidence anytime we're answering a question, anytime that we are writing an essay. Okay, so, and then we have key details. That's what we found right in the text, what we underlined, and possible main ideas. Okay, now if you need to slow down, you're always welcome to pause this and write down, fill these things in, because sometimes we do go a little bit faster. So we just want to go ahead and minimize the length of the video, but you are welcome to go ahead and pause yourself at any time. So let's go ahead and first we're going to look at paragraphs 6 through 8. And some of the details I look at over here on the side are that every citizen quote shall share in freedom, he shall choose his leaders, educate his children, provide for his family, comma, provide for his family. And I know that's not the end of my quote, but I'm going to go ahead and put these ellipses that show that there's more. I just want to use these particular pieces. Okay. Another thing I underlined is, quote, every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. Period, end quotation. Okay, and then the last quote I want to take from paragraphs 6 through 8 is, yet. Remember, I use those ellipses to show that there is something that we are leaving out in many places in this country. Men and women are kept from voting simply because they are Negroes. Okay. All right. So now we want to take these ideas, move this up just a bit so you can see it. All right. So we're going to take these ideas and then these key details and turn them into possible main ideas. All right. So we have paragraphs 6 through 8, possible main ideas. Let me go ahead and look through. Every citizen shall share in freedom. Kind of scan through. Okay. So if I had to take the most important key ideas and turn it into one big idea, what I can do is say something like this. It's a little bit summary and making sure that I hit all the important points. And that's how I come to my main idea. Okay, so we have all Americans have the right to vote. But there are places where African Americans are being denied the right to vote. Okay, let me just double check to make sure I have all the important pieces. Okay, I think that covers it. Now your task is to, in case some of you are still reading, your task is to write down quotes from paragraphs 9 through 11 and write a main idea for it. So just like we did here, you're going to be practicing using paragraphs 9 through 11 and the same chart here. Okay? All right, ladies and gents, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.